So at the moment we have covered a few things. We've got our actions, we've got our reducers, but we don't have an effect and we don't have a selectors. So in the next few videos, this is exactly what we'll be coding. Now, what I want to start with is in fact another effect, because in our container component inside the product item, we're actually dispatching that load toppings action. So we're saying we need the toppings, we want the toppings at this particular point. So it makes perfect sense now to start using the effect right away. We might as well while we're in here. So inside the effects folder, this one here, we can go and create a toppings.effect.ts. Now, as we know, an effect is an injectable. So let's go ahead and import that injectable from @Angular/core. We can then mark our effects class as an injectable and then start using that effect decorator. So let's also import the effect decorator because we know that we want to use it, and we also want to use that actions observable. Now both of these come from NGRX effects. Now we've already used these because inside our pizza effects, we're actually using the effects and the actions and some other operators. So we're going to be using something very similar to this as well. So we're going to say import the of operator, and we get that from rxjs/observable and then /of. We also want a few other operators. We'll import these ahead of time because they're basic ones that we need to use. We want to map over that observable that's returned from the topping service, which we'll take a look at momentarily just to see what we're dealing with. And then we want to import the catch error and that switch map. So we'll grab these from rxjs/operators. So we've pretty much got everything that we need in terms of operators and other imports, but it's time to start using some of our Angular services and also those actions that we just created in the previous couple of videos. Let's go ahead and we'll import everything as the toppings actions, and we get that from back one directory in that actions folder and the toppings.action. We also want the service, which we'll import, and then we'll go and take a look at it. So we'll say from services, and we get that from back two directories in that services folder and the toppings.service. So let's have a click through to this. We can see everything that we're exporting here. Now the topping service has one role. It's a small service. It's not as big as this pizza service, which we have get pizza, create pizza, update, and remove the pizzas. We just have that one function, the get toppings, which returns us that toppings array. So we're using the HTTP client here, which is the new HTTP client with Angular. We don't have to map over the response, and we can just simply return this as an observable. So that means it will slot nicely into our effects class. So let's go and export a class, and we're going to call this one the toppings effects. We can, as usual, mark this as an @injectable. So we're using that decorator so we can inject things via the constructor. So that's the next piece that we'll set up. We'll say private actions with the dollar on the end, just to say that it's an observable. And we're going to use that actions type that we imported above here as the token for the dependency injection. Now the next one that we actually want to import as well is the private toppings service. That will of course be of type from services and topping service. Now I'll put this on new lines when I save this out, because the line length is quite long. That's just nicely reformatting that for us. So we should end up with this, and we just need one effect on this effects class. So let's go underneath the constructor. Now what we want to do, we can just mark this as an effect right away, because we know that we're going to load the toppings, and I'm going to add the dollar on the end there as well. Now it's good to mark these as an effect right away, and then we can just simply continue. We can say this.actions.ofType. Now because we have imported our toppings actions up here, we can then start to say toppings actions dot, and that gives us the capability again to listen to that load toppings action that's being dispatched. So after this, we can use the familiar pipe operator, which we've already learned about. Now what we want to do in the pipe is actually call our switch map. This will then give us the function, and we can return something from the switch map. Now inside the actual body of the function, I'm going to say return this dot topping service get toppings. We can call that function, and that actually returns us an observable. If we hover over here, we can see observable and that toppings array which we're expecting. So this is nice. We can say dot pipe because we want to actually pipe off of this again, and we want to use the map operator inside the pipe. What I'll do is hide the sidebar as we do this so we can see things a little bit more clearly. Now inside of the pipe, that means that we can either map over it or do something with the response, or we can actually catch the error. So we're going to do both of those things just in case there's an error that's thrown. Now when we map over this, because we are getting the toppings, the first argument will give us that response object back. So we can then say we want to return a new action. That's going to be new toppings actions, and the action that we want to dispatch is in fact the success action. We can then call the action and pass those toppings in as we've done in the other effect for the pizzas. We can also set up our error handling. So we're going to say catch error. We're going to get the error from the server. Now in our server we don't really get an error, but in a real production server you'll have your own errors. We're just using that local db.json to handle the actual API for us. So we need to wrap this in an of because we need to return an observable if there is an error. Now we can say new toppings actions, and again, instead of success, we want to call the fail and simply just pass in the error. Now that's pretty much it for this effect. Once I save that, that's neatly formatted that for us so we can see things a little bit more clearly. But we're essentially creating a property, and it's worth mentioning actually that this property name here could be anything we like. We could call it foo if we wanted to. We could simply call it the letter A, but I like to keep these descriptive, so we're going to keep it as load toppings, and then we can actually deal with things like update toppings, create topping, these types of things. Now in this effect, we're only going to have one effect because we just care about loading the toppings. We're not in control of updating them. That is not what happens in this application. However, we are in control of updating, creating, and removing items from pizza or removing the whole pizza together. So as we continue, we'll start building out the pizza effects and get a bit more depth to actually learning the effects in more detail. So once you're done here, what we need to do is instead of going into the module where we have our products module, we can simply just pass this effect in this index file. So you can start to hopefully see how this pattern is nice and we don't need to manage every import inside our products module. So we're breaking them down nicely into the index.ts files, and then they're automatically just registered in the module for us. So let's go ahead and rename this pizzas effects to the toppings effects, and we can switch out the import to the toppings effect. Now because we're passing this effects constant to the module, we need to simply just pass that down into our array. And then similarly underneath, we're going to then toppings.effects. So we're going to then export everything from both of our effects. Now just to clarify that this effects comes from or goes to our products module. And you see here we're doing effects module for feature and then passing in that effects. Now that comes again from next to where we imported the reducers and we have the effects. We can highlight and then click through so we can see that we just registered that out. So this will in fact start working. We can go and check it out in the browser and see that actual response come back, and then we can check out our updated state tree in the Redux DevTools. So back in the browser, I just loaded the products page because that's where we're asking for these three items. Now, if we watch carefully on here, when I navigate to a particular pizza, we then have the router navigation, the load toppings, and the load toppings success. Now, if we expand this a little bit, we can then see the raw state tree. We can see the change that we've just made. So you can see that we have products. We also have toppings. Now, next to this, at this particular level, we also have the pizzas. Now we'll continue and look at the entities. So we've got an object's ID of 1. We've got number 1 as an entity, number 10, number 11, number 12. These are just in a different numerical order, but essentially this contains our array flattened down into entities. So we can use the ID and then look things up nice and easily. If we have a look at our entire state tree, so at this point we can look at the raw state tree. This is the state tree for our entire application. And this is kind of thinking about how we can use that single source of truth and actually take a look at what's happening while we're actually navigating or dispatching events in our application. So we'll have a quick look and then we'll finish this video off. We've got the router reducer, we got the state, we got the params, we're making sure we're fetching that correct pizza, which in this case it is. We can continue down, we have the products, we've got all the pizzas. Now also underneath products, somewhere further down, we will have all of the toppings on the same structure level. So you can see that we've got two different reducers managing two different states, and we're simply using selectors that then query this, if you like, a database of a data structure where we can query anything that we like and compose it and then send it off to our components for rendering. We'll continue down, we have the toppings, you can see all of them have been loaded in here, and then we have loaded as true and loading as false. So in the next video, we're going to create a selector and actually get this hooked up to our products item template, which is this one here.